I'm not sure how many of you have seen this, but there's a new kind of family photo trend that photographers have begun to shoot over the last couple weeks. They are called Death to 2020 photos. Here's how they're done. People hire a photographer. They go out and they buy numbers in the shape of 2020, and they put them in the foreground of their pictures. They then get dressed fancy, they forpitz themselves a little bit. They take an opening picture with their masks on, and then they light the words 2020 on fire and take their masks off. And they take another photo. Death to 2020. There's a family called the Holderness family. They live in Raleigh. They have no doubt become fabulously wealthy because people are stuck at home watching their silly videos all the time. Well, this past week, millions of people watched as they took a box of 2020 calendars. They put them on a bonfire in the backyard, and they lit them on fire and said farewell to 2020, blowing them up in a pile of smoke. Now, I have to admit that having gone through and still going through a once in a millennia virus, there's no question that we could all connect with this ritual in some way or another. And if it would be therapeutic to you and you can do it safely, perhaps after Havdalah, maybe you could even use the candle. You can go buy your own 2020 calendar and light it on fire. Or think of it as Bior Chametz, lighting up the chametz on Pesach. We can all burn the chametz of 2020 before our liberation in 2021. However, I must also say this Shabbat that what concerns me in part with this ritual is the sentiment behind it and what it says about our attitudes about the year gone by and toward the year to come. Like we do on Pesach and nullifying our chametz, can we really nullify 2020? Can we really burn it up and forget that it ever happens? Can we say kol chamira v'chami'ah, any chametz in our domains, and declare it as if it never existed? Together as a people and a nation, are we really succeeding in moving from avdut, from the slavery of 2020, into the cherut, the freedom of 2021? If you've been spending the past week like I have watching the events unfold on our television this week, by now you already know the answer to that question. But my high school classmate, Nathan Blumenfeld, who works for AmeriCorps, giving his life in service to the country, put it better than anyone I've read so far. He pointed out that in large part, 2020 was a bad year, not because it was 2020, but because of a number of events that occurred in the context of years, decades, and in some cases, generations. Quote, the pandemic didn't come out of nowhere in 2020, he writes. We've known about the risks posed by coronaviruses for years. The California wildfires of 2020 didn't come out of nowhere. Social uprisings, backlash against them of 2020 didn't come out of nowhere either. And yes, our country's parallel political universes, one that we saw in full force this past week in 2021, didn't spontaneously diverge, all because it was the year 2020. As Jews, we cannot burn up 2020 and nullify it away like some stale pieces of bagel or bread before Pesach. Not if we're going to have the 2021 of Cherut, the one of freedom that I know so many of us were longing for as we entered the new year. So what do? We put 2020 in hindsight, that is 2020. Our parasha this week, Shemot, begins the Jewish people's journey from slavery to freedom. Yet in its own way, we can't forget it's also a cautionary tale that delivers a stark message to us, and that is that we must be thoughtful in moments of transition by learning from our mistakes. You know, one of my favorite teachings about Shemot has to do with the success of Aaron, Moses, and Miriam. I had a teacher at JTS, Dr. Diane Sharon, who in nearly every class we had would point out how bewildered we should all be by Shemot. Look at Aaron, Moses, and Miriam and how close they are to one another. Miriam, we see bravely safeguards her brother Moshe when he is in the basket in the water. Aaron becomes Moshe's trusty sidekick before Pharaoh. We just spent the whole world, parashas, weeks beyond reading about dysfunctional siblings. How is it possible now that by Shemot, we have 3 siblings who finally figure it out and get along with one another, not a Jacob and Esau, not a Rachel and Leah fighting with one another, but 3 siblings who learn how to get along? According to Dr. Sharon, the answer was always 2 words: thoughtful transition. Moses, Aaron, and Miriam, even without the Torah, likely had access to the cautionary tales that we do about our ancestors. Just as we have access to the stories of 2020, we can't forget that it happened. They saw the chaos that ensued in Sefer Breshit when one brother or sister mistreated or tricked one another, just as we have access to those stories about 2020 when we mistreated or tricked each other. Only instead of burning up that chametz, we see that Moshe, Aaron, and Miriam carried that burden with them. They learned from it. They didn't repeat the mistakes of the past. They moved forward together. Breshit, Genesis, is a book that seeks to create order from chaos. God creates the world in an orderly fashion. Only then it largely moves to a state of disorder. But this week we come to Shemot, and redemption, Geula, comes to the Jewish people. And it's not a redemption built by burning our chametz away and forgetting about it. It's one that's built on the backs of thoughtful transition and learning from mistakes. Friends, 2020 is not a nightmare from which we get to awaken. We don't get to burn the chametz, not this time. We don't get to take a cute photo or video and declare the year null and void. But if we're smart, we can use 2020 as a wake-up call to start making better decisions for our future. As a synagogue, I will tell you that 2020 was a year when all of us, those of us on the professional staff, and also those of us on the board, received quite an education. And because today we're installing our new trustees, I want to say welcome. And I want to say thank you for engaging with us in this process of learning. And because we'll be discharging so many of our trustees, I want to say thank you for also engaging with us in this process of learning. Your steady hands have helped and will help to guide our shul. Just think, so much has happened in the Jewish world in the past year, let alone the world in general in the past week. It's led us all to rethink how we do things. And so thank you for agreeing to bring your unique 2020 insight. You see what I did there? To our board, thank you for helping us to grow and learn as a community for how to better tackle the challenges of the world around us. And of course, as a society, as my friend Nathan points out, we as human beings have a great deal that we must do for 2021 if we are going to bring Geula, redemption, to the world of Moshe, Aaron, and Miriam, and to the Jewish people. With the virus still raging, we must invest in public health infrastructure and disease surveillance and emergency medical capacity. With wildfires and environmental hazards happening more regularly, we have to invest in smarter, safer land use policies. We have to prevent fires and other natural disasters. And yeah, let's not beat around the elephant in the room either. After this past week, we need to invest both the money and the emotional capital in addressing deep social rifts that have festered in our society because we continue to neglect them. In other words, 2021 must be the watershed year when we make better decisions so that our elderly selves and our children and our grandchildren have a home that's not at best significantly less pleasant than the one we have right now. I want to conclude my remarks this Shabbat with the lyrics of a classic Israeli song that many of you may be familiar with. It's also a prayer. It's called Bashana Haba'ah, in the new year. Y'all may know the song. We pray Bashana Haba'ah, that in the year that will be, we'll spread our hands before us, gathering light that will dazzle our eyes. And between our eyes, God willing, a new sun will rise. O tirei, kama tov yeh, bashana, bashana, haba. We will see how good it will be in the new year. Bashana Haba'ah is a beautiful song. It's a song that fills our hearts with hope for the new year. But we can't forget the chorus, Od Tireh, God willing, may we yet see. Those words, Od Tireh, remind us that the new year is not one of definite probabilities. Each new year is a year of aspirational possibilities. And friends, if we light our 2020 calendars on fire, instead of looking at them and reading them and studying them, if we say good riddance to 2020, instead of learning from our mistakes, if we forget how much pain and suffering has happened, this won't be the 21 that we hope it will be. But I know, because I know all of you, and I know our new folks coming onto the board, our wonderful synagogue community, that all of us here have the courage and the strength to make it happen. O tirei, kama tov yeh, bashana, bashana haba. May the new year hold blessing and promise for all of us. Amen.